Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, in particular to our Good Design Network members, friends. Today is an important day because we have the seminar, the fourth seminar, Contextualism, College City and Beyond seminar, organized by our member of the Scientific Committee, Professor Graham Shea. So this again returns to raw and city, but examines the generative rules for making meta-city context in the information age. The age of blogs, platform networks, with its change in mapping and the representational technology, have brought about a new scale that expands into peripheral the landscapes. So speakers will look at Rowe and Unger's studios in terms of fabrication of fabric, role of landscape, new mapping and communication methods, creating a new form of context and community. Our chair will be Professor David Gramashey, as I told, professor in urban design program at Columbia, and who is the organizer of all Contextualism and Beyond seminar series. Our discussant will be Professor Tom Ming, Architecture and Urban Design Professor from the Southeast University in Nanjing, responsible for teaching and research in urban design, urban regeneration, and urban policy analysis. So we have four panelists. I will say some about the CVs. So the first is Professor Gum Kaliskan with the learning from Colin Rowe, Contextualist Methodology for Urban Fabrication. With this doctorate degree in urbanism at TU Delft, he has lectured in the structured at the Methu Faculty of Architecture as a professor Urban Design and Morphology and served as a visiting professor at the MIT Department of Urban Studies and Planning in the US. In the body of TEPAV, Economic Research Foundation Turkey, he consulted for the strategic vision project for the Gaza Urban Strip and authored the Urban Design Master Plan of Ankara Technology Base in 2024. With the Colin Rowe contextualism approach, his current paper presents a comprehensive review of the design studies supervised by Colin Rowe and Corner, comprising 118 projects in total. In the presentation, he aims to reveal the underlying morphological strategies for fabricating type of morphologically diverse and coherent urban forms by design. Then we will have panels two, architect Sue with the row for Unger's studio exhibition corner. Principal of Urban Terrains Lab. She was one of the three invited architects for the 2023 Venice Biennial Korean Pavilions exhibition, and participating artist for the 2014 Venice Biennale Korean Pavilions Cross Eye View exhibition, which won the Golden Lion Award. While she was assistant professor of urban design at Seoul National University, Graduate School of Environmental Studies 2014-19, she was a member of the City of Seoul Architecture Policy Committee 2016-18 and the curator of Asia Urbanism at Asia Culture Center in Gwangju, Korea 2015-16. Her talk will focus on the pedagogical and the disciplinary questions in a context that initiated the research, curation, and design of the Rowe per Unger's Untold Collaboration, the City Exhibition 2010 at Corner. Then we'll have panelist three, Professor Charles Graves, with understanding the context that formed Colin Rowe Urban Studio or Urban Design Studio, fall 1977, spring 1978. With a Master of Architecture at the Cornell University in 1979, Professor Graves practiced architecture in New York City until 1985, after which he began his teaching career at ETH Zurich. In 2018, Graves retired from teaching at the Kent State University and is a present professor emeritus. In this presentation, he plans on discussing the project Colin Rowe issued in his urban design studio during the academic years 1970-79 and the importance of to realize the context of all the elements influencing both the process and the product. Occurring both within and around the Cornell campus, Professor Charles Graves will end the session following an exercise given during his years spent at Cornell in a Cornell Row studio. And the fourth panelist is Professor Victoria Marshall with the Becoming Urban, Peri-Urban, Post-Rural and Rural Manifestation. Senior lecturer at the National University of Singapore, Professor Marshall is the director of the Master of Landscape Architecture program, with her research focus on the future urban-rural hybrid in monsoon Asia. Her works include peri-urban cartographies, Kolkata's urban ecologies and Celtic ruralities 2024, and a co-authored book, Patch Atlas, in integrating design practices and ecological knowledge for cities as a complex system. Her presentation starts with normative thinking, considering the urban edge, the periphery of the urban, and the becoming urban. The study involves a larger, collective, and a comparative project learning from multifaceted kings of urban everywhere. The study extends the research into multi-channel audio visual work, which is both an installation and a performance. So we have a very, very important panel, chair and discussant, and my very pleasure is to give the floor to the first panelist, Professor Olgu Kaliskan. We don't hear you, Olgu.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen first. View. Full screen, yeah. All right, well, in this presentation, I will explore Colin Rowe's contribution to contextualist urban design from the standpoint of his morphological approach, not as a theorist, but as a designer. Here specifically, I will focus on his distinctive interpretation of the urban fabric and reconsider his legacy in light of contemporary generative design techniques, drawing on an extensive review of his graduate urban design studio at Cornell University. As an intellectual deeply engaged with architectural history and theory, Rowe provided a willing conceptual framework that operated as a critical perspective on urbanism. His studio, in this sense, functioned as a kind of a laboratory, a place for developing and testing his theoretical ideas. Following the Mathematics of the Ideal Villa, published in 1976, Collage City, co-authored with Fred Coulter, became his milestone publication and remains one of the classic texts in urban design theory. As you see in the cover, despite the numerous illustrations, the book is particularly characterized by the depiction of that small German town. Looking closer at the Wiesbaden plan, one can easily discern two opposing fabric typologies coexisting within the same context. Among those figures, Imperial and later on Papal Rome, with its diverse collective form and fabric, is subtly presented as an alternative model to the idea of total design and urbanistic interpretation of social engineering. The idea of collage, in this sense, itself was profoundly inspired by Piranesi's visionary drawings of ancient Rome, which hypothetically reconstruct the city's eclectic complexity. In this regard, Rowe and Coulter highlighted the inherited assets of the traditional city and its versatile textural qualities. Such admiration laid the foundation for its deep criticism of modern architecture in the urban context, particularly the so-called object fixation and formal autonomy, which came to dominate modernist planning and design. Yet Rowe and Coulter did not advocate an orthodox traditionalism, as for instance the Kriya brothers did. Instead, they seek to reconcile the modern and the traditional through a pluralistic strategy, the so-called bricolage. At this point, the notion of context and the idea of designing in consideration of context, later known as contextualism, came forth. As discussed by Schumacher, one of Rawls' early students, contextualism was coined originally as a term by Stephen Hurt and Stuart Cohen in their co-authored thesis in 1964. The term was derived from the notion of texture and referring to the construction of the fabric within its context. This could either through a design outcome that generates its own textural context, even on a tabula rasa, or through one that responds to the specific characteristics of a given urban setting. An approach that placed figure ground mapping at the forefront of representation in Colin Rowe's studio. In both theory and practice, Rawls' work pursued a dialectical relationship between figure and ground, seeking a coalescence between the regular and irregular, formal and informal, types and variants through urban patterns. His urban design studio, conducted at Cornell University over 28 years, exemplified a systematic exploration of designing urban fabric, what I would call morphological urban design research. The studio projects developed with students for improving different urban contexts provided the empirical foundation for a series of concepts that were later crystallized in the book Collage Study. Among them, in early projects, hybridization of modern and traditional typologies was a recurring theme. For instance, in the proposal for Central Harlem, then in some projects, they aim to resolve grid collisions, fabricating new textures through hybrid building forms, which were called set pieces, as in the case of the project for Buffalo Waterfront or the Lower East Side Manhattan. Many of you would recall the Roma Interrotta project for the late 70s, in which Rowe and his team were among the 12 invited participants. Unlike some other architects who envisioned totalizing the reconstruction of Rome, Rowe's team proposed an alternative contextualist approach, constructing a fictive history as a means of designing a holistic but diverse urban pattern. The point is that beyond the generic conceptualizations found in high theory discourse in architecture and urbanism, Rowe never explicitly articulated the design operations underlying the so-called collage study. It was Stephen Peterson, the leading designer of the Roma Interrotta team, who did so. Following his article in 1979, he and Barbara Littenberg elaborated on contextualist urban design from their own perspective in 2020. Following collage study, though the idea of pluralist urbanism has resonated in the contemporary urban design literature quite extensively, its morphological insight is yet to be investigated in depth. Along with some earlier design research revisiting the collage concept within the studio works, like what Charles Graves did within his urban design course at Kent State University, or the Cornell studio conducted on Ungers versus Rowe in 2016. In one of our recent studies, we developed a methodological model using parametric design tools to ensure morphological coherence while generating diverse urban fragments incrementally, which was conceptually parallel to the idea of collage study. We tested this model in Istanbul, a city shaped by piecemeal development and fragmented spatial patterns. Following the principal setting designating hypothetical fragments and their transitions, we algorithmically established grid formations through compositional variations, the distinct urban patches of the so-called collage. And we parameterized the basic morphological elements like urban block, float, street and building for urban form generation to control the piecemeal development in an integrated manner, while ensuring unity in diversity as a universal design principle, an alternative to the mainstream modes of spatial production and development control regime that generates fragmentation in the body of our cities. Then about 6 years ago, I decided to examine Rowe's design education practice more closely. During my research, I analyzed the design experimentation of Cornell's Urban Design Studio between 1964 and 1991. Based on that framework, I reviewed 122 thesis projects made in the graduate program. Through this systematic analysis, I developed a typology of urban fabric conceptualized as fields within Rowe's terminology. The typology is basically characterized by the fundamental morphological factors such as border condition, whether the fabric is delineated or open for further growth, the way to occupy the terrain or diffuse through the existing fabric, whether in the form of a linear string or in the form of connected linear fabrics. Whether it's fabricated by a set piece generating its vicinity, or exposing a hybrid character having multiple features within a single field condition. Then most importantly, I identified four fundamental morphological operations implicit in Rowe's approach to designing urban fabric. In that framework, consolidation either reinforces the existing fabric or gives way to generating subfields within it. Conjunction, on the other hand, by extending the different grid patterns colliding in a given context, by reconciling them through varied patterns. Then typological transmission used to transform the dominant building typologies into other types, as seen in New York City urban block formation, or retaining the block pattern while transforming its building configuration. And finally, assemblage, composing holistic fabrics from heterogeneous fragments as exemplified by Romeo. In assemblage, fragments remain legible, sometimes merged, sometimes distinct, depending on the desired relationship between the old and the new fabrics. After all, building upon this analysis, my colleagues and I asked, can the collage city approach be parametrically encoded to operate beyond its theoretical abstraction? To test this, we selected a case in Ankara, Turkey, a rapidly developing peripheral district characterized by fragmented growth. The selected area is partially developed under a master plan with an already designated network structure and block layout. Within such an extensive urban field, the built fabric is being generated incoherently with all those ruptures caused by speculative building activities. Now, within this setting, we tested the four morphological operations in relation to local fabric conditions. Accordingly, through consolidation, we defined infill logics responsive to the existing layouts by using the space syntax tool to generate a legible fabric through network integration. For the conjunction, we calibrated grid directions across adjacent ensembles and fabricated new fragments accordingly. For the typological transmission, we introduced some parameters of urban blocks to fabricate an identical pattern of grid extension in which alternative typologies could be generated. And for assemblage, we experimented with different grid typologies like distorted, tartan, irregular, while maintaining local continuity with their adjacent, either existing or newly generated fabrics. Since the eventual morphological quality has not been satisfactory after all, those initial attempts involved, we have revisited this design methodology within our current course, Parametric Urban Design at METU. After all, one could argue that such a computational interpretation of Rowe's design thinking would not align with his original stance, which was somehow marked by a clear critique of and resistance to use of technology in spatial design and planning. However, considering especially the rapidly growing urban context in the global south, especially, where diverse typologies tend to converge within fractured sociospatial settings, I would rather argue that we should develop some operational models controlling the piecemeal developments in a coherent and integrated manner, with a positive connotation of collage as claimed by Rowe and Cotter. Therefore, by revisiting the compositional theory of Rowe on a computational basis, we believe that one could support the so-called pluralist urbanism based on a coherent, multivalent, and open urban fabric in a systematic, smart, and operational manner. This belief actually rests on the strong assumption that past critical theories of urbanism continue to offer a relevant and productive foundation for contemporary practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga.
We have the second panelist. So thanks a lot, Olga. Very, very interesting your presentation.
Thank you very much.
And now we have the second panelist, who is Ire Su. So the floor is yours with the Roy Perunger's Studio Exhibition Corner.
Hold on one second. Okay. Apologies, having a bit of a hard time trying to set up the screen. Okay, hold on. Okay. I'll have to use this other screen. First, well, thank you first for having me on this panel. This work was done quite a long time ago, so I had to scrape back quite a bit to remember and try to recollect the contents, and hopefully I am able to share with you the important contents that was part of the exhibition at Cornell. So I am the principal of Urban Terrains Lab based in New York, and I've been teaching architecture and urbanism studios here in the US as well as in Korea. When I was teaching...
Ira, sorry. We see the help window. Okay, now it's okay. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So when I was teaching at Cornell, I had the opportunity to curate research and design the Rowe X Unger's Untold Collaborations on the City exhibition, which was part of the Shaping Architecture Symposium in 2009, which focused on the pedagogical history and trajectory of architecture education. As a visitor to Cornell, as some of you already know, the Department of Architecture is a place where one cannot escape the mysticism and folklore surrounding the stories of Colin Rowe and Ungers during their period of cohabitation in this remote, beautiful landscape of Ithaca. The ghost of the two figures lurks behind every corner, every encounter. The amazing stories of personal escapades and incidental conflicts are relished as part of the school's legacy and continue to hold ground as part of institutional history. What exactly happened during this period of coexistence to have produced such productive, influential work persists as an irresistible project of pedagogical archaeology? In a pre-discussion with Professor Shane, I was told that the role of landscape relative to Colin Rowe and contextualism is one of the themes the seminar is interested in. So in the comparative analysis of Rowe and Unger's work, I believe that the thesis of the collage city as the cumulative city and Unger's cities within the city as the green archipelago can both be seen as efforts to investigate alternative urban strategies by expanding the field of architecture through the role of landscape. But before we get into the exhibition, I would like to briefly explain the context in which the inquiry into Rowe and Ungers began in the first place, because it all started with this landscape project. So my first project out of school was for the Olympic Sculpture Project located in Seattle, Washington. I was lucky to be part of the initial competition process at Wiseman Freddie Architects, who were the lead designers, and was the project architect until its final completion. The Olympic Sculpture Park was a very exciting project, where an unusual project where the boundaries of architecture, landscape, infrastructure, and art overlapped and merged. While I was working on this project, it was interesting to reference Rosalind Krauss's sculpture in the expanded field diagram, because I think it provides an interesting framework that questions what is architecture and what is not architecture, and what is landscape and what is not landscape. And in this framework, a project like the Olympic Sculpture Park can be reinterpreted as a question that is posed of what is architecture. So while the expanded field is an exciting concept to understand new modes of operation for architecture and the urban design, I must share with you that in practice, the expanded field invoked territorial disputes between the disciplines of architecture and landscape. There were many discussions and disputes between architect and landscape architect to determine what is architecture and what is landscape, like who details what was a main concern. What was interesting was also at the similar time, a close friend, architecture friend, was working at field operations who had initiated the project, the Highline project, which is also one of these hybrid landscape architecture infrastructure projects. But what is interesting to find is that there also the landscape architecture definitions were blurred, and disputes over credit, documentation, design was all part of the process. So as an architect, coming from a practice background and as an architect working on urban projects that converge between architecture and landscape, I find that the disciplinary boundaries in practice are in reality quite fluid. The discourse shifts based on the audience and ideology and the market it represents. But in a project, what is architecture and landscape is never predetermined. So my experience regarding the disciplinary conflicts versus the fluidity in practice was the main reason why personally became curious about the pedagogical history of urban design relative to the discipline of architecture and landscape architecture. So when I arrived at Cornell, I was intrigued by the Rowe and Unger's urban design studio investigations in the 60s and 70s that were happening in context of Team 10, Archigram, Townscape, Jane Jacobs within the discipline. And because the urban investigations pursued by Rowe's College City and Unger's cities within the city, Berlin as Green Archipelago, were both integrating the idea of landscape through architectural mechanisms, it seemed an obvious investigation that had to be done at that point. So the research for the exhibition was based on the publications and thesis work, like Professor Kaliskan had focused on. Cornell has a trove of thesis projects archived. We also referenced the Cornell archive papers of Professor Rowe. Professor Ungers did not have much private archives left, but Professor Rowe had a certain number of archive materials available for our perusal, as well as their publications and writings they have produced. So the analysis focused on the parallel progression of the collage cities, the thesis of the collage city and the cities within the cities relative to the societal disciplinary context, a selection of studio work publications as examples of studio as laboratory, and publications as book machines, as Unger Studios called it, were central to the pedagogical framework that were showcased in the exhibition. A comparative timeline was constructed to identify key connections and overlaps relative to the context of the period. I'll just go over a few key areas that we sort of identified within the timeline. Rowe had established the UD studio in 63, while Ungers was appointed chair at Cornell 69 to 75, and by 69, Ungers established a 2-year post-professional regional design and architectural program there. By the 70s, Ungers was eager to bring European architects and planners, introduce them to the US, and Team 10 was one of the invitees, which Ungers organized in 1972. And what's interesting is that a note that we found, a letter from Rowe to Ungers, we found in one of the archive that states, quote, "For all my disagreements with your present propensities, policies, and procedures, I cannot but agree with Werner, a professor at Cornell currently, that your superiority to that little collection just does not need to be proclaimed. Your attitude as of 65 seems to me, and still does, to be ahead of anything that Team 10 has come up with or could ever understand." These kind of like little excerpts that we found notates the extreme collaborative sort of setting in which Rowe and Ungers had coexisted despite the discrepancies as well, which was quite intriguing for us during the research that was progressed. Also, this was in context of Colin Rowe's 72 intro text for the 5 architects publications, where Rowe is seemingly positive of the new direction of architecture in North America through Eisenman and Meyer and such, that is devoid of the political social baggage of the European counterparts. But he was also skeptical of the dangers of European modernist style purged of ideological content being established as a suitable veneer for the corporate activities of enlightened capitalism, irrespective of its availability as a consistent language. He notes. By the mid-70s, The projects produced on both sides start to build upon similar strategies, utilizing urban morphologies, allegorical symbolism, and archetypal metaphors in the urban context. The figure and ground approach sort of progresses into this shared acknowledgement of the history as something to base urban morphological strategies that could provide alternative modes of urban fabric production for both Ungers and Rose Studios. As Professor Kaliskan had mentioned, the Rome Interrupted was a significant project which initiated this discussion of the urban fabric and landscape into his discussions. And meanwhile, Ungers has started the urban book series, the urban block, the urban villa, and urban garden studios and publications, which were the book machines supposed to become a generator for urban strategies, where the research into historical typologies and morphologies of certain urban fabrics becomes a strategy of synthetic formal production for the city through the publications as well. So the publication in itself becomes machines of generating the urban fabric. So significant, interestingly enough, I guess we all know, 1978 collage cities, as well as the cities within the city, were published on the same same period. Both publications incorporate the idea of landscape as a prominent mode of operation. We go. Especially for both Collage City and the Urban Garden book that is shown here. It's one of the three urban books by the Unger Studios. They reference Hadrian's Villa as a prototype for a flexible urban strategy, and Hadrian Villa as a landscape prototype is also an interesting, I guess, transition that we can take regarding the landscapes, ideas of landscape coming into the references. In 1978, the design of the cumulative city lectures, which sort of, I think, becomes the sort of the conclusive point in which the Rowe and Unger's relationship sort of establishes. Rowe notes regarding Le Corbusier and Speer in his summary of the symposium. He says, of recent years, it has become extremely hard to determine just what is temptation by the devil and what is the revelation of an angel. All the same choice is hard because I think they're both so repulsive. As Matthias Unger said the other day, but this is the only choice, and isn't this a false dichotomy? After this, Rowe goes on to argue with that a theatrical idea of the city where tragedy, comedy, and satire are all to be presented as the cumulative city. One additional note found from a letter from Rowe to Ungers, I think notates exactly what this relationship had engendered. Rowe quotes, of recent years, it has become extremely hard to determine. Oh, sorry, not this one. As I know, you know, the central issue is Dammerstock. Then why not focus on just this? It has always been the urban design studio's central preoccupation. And though you try to run away from it, it is also really yours. Then why not have a conference or something about this? The theme, Dammerstock and the Villa Radius, establish standards which cannot be abandoned, but which so far have been destructive of any interesting or satisfactory urban texture. This is the problem. It is notorious in neither science fiction, nor advocacy planning, nor townscape, nor Jane Jacobs will make it go away. So Dammerstock is the 20s Walter Gropius's planning for the town, and that relative to the Radiant City ideas, that both ideologies of planning that urban design could not provide the alternative, the the alternatives that Ungers and Rowe have both wanted to pursue is indicated by this passage, I believe. So as a sort of a wrap up of this kind of content of the Rowe and Ungers studios, we can argue that for both of them, that architecture and landscape were both integral modes of operation, urban fabric production. So for Rowe, the excursus, the addendum of the collage city, that is at the end, focuses on the following architectural, landscape, and infrastructural motifs: memorable streets, stabilizers, potentially interminable set pieces, splendid public terraces, ambiguous and composite buildings, nostalgia producing instruments, and the garden. They become archetypes, architecture and landscape typologies, morphologies that work symbolically and allegorically in the city. So for the cities within the city, Ungers actively implements landscape as a connective field and productive infrastructure in which the figure of morphologically distinct urban archipelagos are connected. And the green landscape becomes architectural, infrastructural, and as well as offering public space. And this was, of course, provided as a model for the shrinking city, the West Berlin condition. As an extension of the Green Archipelago, he also discusses this notion of the half a landscape, where disconnected architectural spatial events between Berlin and Potsdam are connected to create a network of cultural landscapes in the natural environment. This creates a spatial narrative at an architectural as well as a regional scale, urban mode of operation. For both Rowe and Ungers, the historical allegories, morphological references, typological systems were active generators of producing urban fabric, and landscape. The understanding of landscape becomes an integral part of the architecture operating in the expanded field. Just to note a few things. I wasn't sure if I should include this, but so my personal work also has been much influenced by this kind of research, understanding of the process of Rowe and Ungers, and of course, working in Korea for a number of years, I was able to participate in many urban design competition projects and proposals. And I think what it was valuable was this kind of process of research, urban morphological research that was able to become a generator for sort of contextual design ideas. So this was like the Seoul Sky Pass proposal. We were invited by the city of Seoul. It was supposed to be the High Line of Seoul. It went to MVRDV, which they did a great job of. And then the next project was a competition for the Noder Island, which is a dilapidated island in the middle of Hangang River, which was to be revived into a like a DIY cultural space, which we had participated. Also through studios, I think the Ungers book machine concept and thesis were extremely valuable for my understanding of how urban morphologies of informal cityscapes can become generators of design planning ideas. And some studio works were focused on the cosmetic surgery market of Seoul, the underground urbanism that is expansive, the urbanism of death, of funerals, and rooftop scapes also. And lastly, the exhibition that was done in the past Venice Biennale were focused on the transformation of urbanscape with diminishing population and climate change, and what to envision in the future through urban morphological studies. Thank you for having me, and I hope I didn't miss out any parts of the exhibition that were important, but thank you.
No, that was perfect. It followed on from Olga unexpectedly. Well, I think it's
Yes.
really great. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks a lot for the very interesting presentation, very soon. And now we have the third finalist, Professor Charles Grace, with Understanding the Context that formed Colin Rose Urban Design Studio, Fall 1977, Spring 1978. Please, the floor is yours. Charles, also your audio. We don't hear you. Okay, now yes.
So thank you for your time. In this instant, I've been asked to talk about some of the work that was actually issued by Colin Rowe in the time I was at Cornell Studio. So let me see if I can remove this in the time being. Contextualism in design is an approach of creating something by considering the possible environment, whether physical, cultural, or user-centric. Contextualism in urban design is a design philosophy that creates both a built environment sensitive to their surrounding social, cultural, and physical context, fostering harmony between new and existing structures. There is, though, something that both processes share. It's the general context or circumstances that form the setting for both events, or ideas allowing for them to be fully understood and assessed. In this presentation, I plan on discussing the projects Colin Rowe issued in his urban design studio during the academic years of 77, 79. Well, to fully understand the academic atmosphere during this period, it's important to realize that the context of all the elements that were influencing both the processes and the product. I'll be discussing then the following three contextual elements that occurring both within and around the Cornell campus. The influential people, I'll talk about the faculty, the students, and the visiting critics, a number of publications that were occurring at that time, and the processes, some of the projects that were taking place for the students, faculty, and practicing architects. Influential people, without going into detail in this case, I can also tell you that in 1977, I began my two-year program at studying at urban design at Cornell. And my introduction, though, was through Fred Coder, who came as a guest lecturer, a professor at the University of Kentucky of Architecture. I was a student in the college and enrolled in Coder's fifth-year thesis studio, design studio. During the academic year of 74, 75, Fred invited Colin Rowe to lecture. And it was during my time at Coder's studio that I first heard the terms collage and typology. Some of the people in the two-year term at Cornell were several key people that were either teaching, visiting critics, or fellow students who I feel were influential and therefore worth mentioning. I won't go into detail, but these people's, in this case, you can read on your own, the faculty and staff, some of the students, and some of the visiting critics that were taking place at the time. These are some of the publications that I issued or are noted here that were taking place while I was a student. Of course, you had the Collage City being written by Coder and Rowe. You have Parc de Ville by Leon Creer that was published. You have Rome in Terota, which also included Urban Design Tactics by Peterson, Urban Transformation, and then Urban Space by Rob Creer. Delirious, New York, Cool House, The Museum by Sterling in Germany, Contextualism by Shane, and Contextualism, Urban Ideals and Deformations by Tom Schumacher. Three of the projects that I felt were influential, especially to me in this case, was one that, being produced by Michael Manfredi, which is his thesis, Urban Development for Upper Manhattan. Stephen Fong's project that he was working on for Regent's Park in London. And then Michael Dennis issued a studio in '78 project that was developed. And this is a project by Willem van Kampen, where you can actually see he collaged part of the Rome Inter Rota plan inside to work on the development of his project. 3 urban design studio projects issued by Colin Rowe in the academic years. In the Architecture Cornell Journal, issue 2, Stephen Hurt writes an article titled Conjectures on Urban Form. In the introduction for this article, the following is written. Hurt examines the methods and theories of Cornell Urban Design Studio. The author correlates studio projects with the evolution of the theories of contextualism, collision city, and collage city. Hurt notes that these theories emerged in parallel and that no particular project represents one or all of these theories in a pure form. Thus, interpretive analysis of the Cornell studio work relates at its major concepts propounded by studio members and especially by Rowe and Coder in their book Collage City. These were the foundations for the design approach of Colin Rowe's design studio. Archetypically, though the concepts weren't discussed during the studio hours. These discussions occurred via his lecture course, which we were all required to take, and the weekly evening meetings at Rowe's home in Ithaca, New York. The first exercise that was issued was a figure ground of Wiesbaden, Germany, and it ran for 3 weeks, and it just handed out 8.5 by 11 sheet, a photocopy of Copper's 1967 thesis plan, along with the figure ground pieces. You can see in the lower right-hand corner here, the instructions by Rowe used the pieces to redesign the plan of Wiesbaden. The only typological pieces that looked familiar to me were the pentagram shape with the circle in the center and the crescent, or Castle St. Angelo in Bath, England, the Royal Crescent. The small squares were always referred to as popcorn by Colin Rowe. This is the first row shows the final design that actually produced. This center series, the process, the final images, possible views in specific areas. The last series of the images represent a process that appeared in all 3 first-year exercises that I did, perspectival views of possible urban and architectural typologies. At the times I'd also manipulate the images to better represent my design ideas as shown in the image on the next page. Exercise number 1 was basically an introduction to Rowe's design theories and teaching methods. He'd arrive in studio, lit cigarette in mouth, grab a stool, and proceed to go from desk to desk. If you had anything worth discussing on your desk, he'd pull out a Sharpie pen and create what he called scribbles on your trace paper drawings while describing a possible precedent it drew. Colin would assume you knew what he was referring to, in this case, the arcade in Naples, Italy, and how it connected to the theater. Of course, the chances were low that you had any idea what he was referring to, but by the next class, you both knew the urban architectural pieces inside and out. Exercise 2 was issued as a figure ground plan of the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, and ran for 12 weeks. The area in red was the given site. We were also asked to incorporate the Harvard Kennedy School building into our design, which is this small piece here. The aerial view from the 1970s, though, doesn't show the Kennedy School, as you can see here on the right. I began the design process at the early point, presented the design to Rowe. You can see it's this kind of octopus shape here. The only thing that I think lasted was this area to the left and above. At the desk, Rowe sketched the following, and during the critique mentioned the phrase fat city. I took this to mean designing with subtraction instead of just designing with addition, and the process led to this next drawing you can see on the right here. In Steve Peterson's article, Urban Design Tactics, which was being written at the time we were in studio, he displays two illustrations when discussing the urban fields. He describes the fields as overlapped and interwoven, an important aspect of collage in the above fat city. The following are the images I presented at the final review for project. The first series illustrates the design process prior to the final review. The sketches with the red dots are images that Rowe actually drew on during the desk creds here. Shown here are the sketches that Colin worked on during the desk creds, and you can see, especially in this lower right one here, as we all know, that typically we all do at the same time. While we're giving a critique, you're kind of drawing and sketching at the same time, which Colin then describes as these scribbles. Shown here are 2 pages from the Cornell Journal number 2 that demonstrate the proposals by 3 of my classmates for the same site. Exercise number 3 was issued in the spring of '78 and ran for the whole 15 weeks. We were issued a figure ground plan of the portion of Midtown Manhattan, as shown here on the right, along the East River. The site began just south of the UN building and continued for 12 blocks long by roughly 2 blocks wide. Unfortunately, I don't have all the final drawings for the studio project. Shown here is what I could locate in the project and were a series of design process drawings, which are a combination of set collage, urban precedents, and design. These pieces here in the middle, as you can see, are some of the ideas that I came up with. And the idea of collage really takes place with this next series here, as you can see in this one specifically, if I'm pointing to it. This is Piazza San Marco as an example. This is a sketch on trace by a paper by Colin Rowe, which was very influential at the time. The final design incorporated the following pieces of urban fabric. The pieces collages starting from the top: Piazza San Marco in Venezia, Piazza San Pietro Cathedral, the Cortile in the Belvedere in Roma, the Castle San Angelo in Rome, and the Hofburg in Vienna. In exercise number 3, I also recall initial concept for collaging. The existing set pieces occurred after reading an early draft of Urban Design Tactics by Steve Peterson. Collaging was a quick method for generating design ideas and understanding the scale of the site. Note the similarities to the design pieces given in the first semester exercise. At the beginning of the fall semester in '78, I met with Colin to discuss the ideas for my master's thesis. During our conversation, I told Colin I was very interested in the historic urban fabric and historic city plans, having taken John Repp's course and studied Wayne Copper's thesis. The urban design precedents published by Michael Dennis and Herdick, and having read early drafts of both Collage City and the article Urban Design Tactics. Rowe then suggested I study urban scale and recommended I use Manhattan Central Park as a set ruler or scale device. Colin then took me to the architectural library and introduced me to 2 historic city plan sources: the Atlas of the Society of the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge and the Baedeker Travel Guides. The practice of collaging these 4 pieces and the last exercise eventually led to the production of my master's thesis during my second year at Cornell. At some point in the first year, as I mentioned, I took John Repp's course. During the course exposed me to numerous city plans contained within the book. My thesis actually turned out then to be Manhattan: A Measure, with the collage librarian Judy Holliday as a mentorship, I also discovered a few plans in the Cornell map library. As an example, it's worth noting that both the plan for Beijing was originally a 1950 CIA aerial photo. I then traced the plans and had them photographically enlarged or reduced to comparative scale. Rowe also encouraged me to apply for a Grant Foundation grant to help produce the drawings. When awarded, this allowed me to hire a few undergraduate students to help trace the plans. After placing the Central Park to the side as a scale comparison, I then collaged Central Park into a series of plans. For example, here's Central Park collaged onto Central Paris. At the end of my second year at Cornell, I exhibited 40 of the 16 by 20 figure ground plans shown here in this illustration. On the last two pages, instead of using Central Park as a scale, I generated a figure ground of Midtown Manhattan. Like the third year exercise in my first year at Cornell, I collaged pieces of urban fabric into the plan Midtown. Both upper left is existing figure ground of the Midtown Manhattan, followed by an image of parts of various urban pieces woven into the existing fabric. In the final image illustrating the urban pieces where they were originally obtained. At the final review, the discussion of the plates by the committee focused on the comparative scale of cities and the individual plates as frameable pieces. Ironically, there was no dialogue about the space, urban elements, or strategies of design tactics. It wasn't until years later that I published Genealogy of Cities that I fully understand the potential of studying historic urban plans. As an example, while writing the Genealogy of Cities, I took the image of collage of Paris and Central Park and expanded on the concept, illustrating Le Corbusier's proposal for Central Paris and exemplifying the impact his design would have on this area. 20 years after my time spent at Cornell, I began writing the Genealogy of Cities. Early on, I came across two articles in two different journals by Albert Peets, both titled The Genealogy of L'Enfant's Design of Washington. In these two articles, Peets traces the historic architectural and city scale fabric, which he considers as a precedent for L'Enfant's design of the USA capital city. Peets' genealogy drawings compare streets, relationship, and distance of triangles and scale comparisons of building fabric, and Peets further traces the genealogy of DC, outlining the Roman legionary camps, hunting forces, and early French town plans. Through this means of genealogy analysis, the observer can see a portion of the design process that may have influenced L'Enfant's design for DC. Peets' process of tracing the genealogy led me to consider the possibility of a pattern of typology for city designs, and eventually to the researching and writing of this book and further understanding of collage at a city scale. With the publication of my book, my time spent studying with Colin Rowe had come to a full circle. In the education of architecture of the NAAB, it requires that all architectural students are introduced to urban design at the undergraduate level and is part of an accreditation prerequisite. With the specifics of how this introduction is achieved can vary between curricula. NAAB accreditation mandates that architecture programs incorporate a range of design knowledge that includes urban design principles. This ensures the graduates are prepared to consider the broader context of their work and how it interacts with the built environment on a larger scale, and requires architectural programs to introduce students to urban design as a part of the accreditation requirement. To accomplish this prerequisite, the College of Architecture and Environmental Design at Kent State made the decision to use the spring semester third year design studio as a UD platform. And since my Master's of Architecture degree was in urban design, I was asked to coordinate this semester. My pedagogies for urban design are based on those of Colin Rowe. These teaching ideas were founded on a few basic principles or foundation: analysis and diagram, collage and precedents, urban and architectural typologies and morphologies, designing exterior urban space, and readings. an actual publication about this whole issue is going to be published here by Olga in a recent December 2025 journal that he's co-editing. This is some quick examples of some of the work that was actually published during this time. I encourage you to read the article to get the whole full data. It was also mentioned, I think, earlier before we came on. I'm in the process of, I have a blog looking at cities where I basically write about anything that comes to mind during my retirement. You can find it at lookingatcities.info. I'm also in the process of, when I go to Europe during the summers, looking at a number of urban pieces or fabrics. The two in the middle are checkmarked that I've already looked at. And with that, thank you for your time.
Amazing.
Thanks a lot, Charles.
Yeah.
I think that this is the moment of our discussant, Professor Tong Ming.
Sorry, we still had one more presentation from
Victoria, yeah.
There's still Victoria.
Mhm. You can see your screen.
Yes, right. Sorry, Victoria. Yes, we see very well. So your presentation is becoming urban, pre-urban, post-rural, and rural intensification.
All right, thank you. Let me just do this. Okay, so thank you for the Genealogy of Urban Design Network for inviting me to present my topic at this fourth seminar on contextualism, collage, city, and beyond. In this talk, I'm going to give an overview of my book through the lens of cartography, and along the way, I'll share my reflections on the title of my presentation, Becoming Urban, Peri-Urban, Post-Rural, and Rural Intensification, not manifestation, as shown on the poster. I didn't pick that up until today. Okay. Let me just, yeah. So in India, scholars have not only looked at how maps are drawn, but also how everyday people are drawn into maps and the mapping process. Such engagement with the mapping act points towards my approach for researching cartography. I extend cartography through an urban political ecology of a 1 kilometer square area of peri-urban Kolkata in Gangetic West Bengal, India. The study area sample was selected precisely because of the absence of spectacular or unusually rapid change. There are no mega projects here, no stories of sudden eviction. In the absence of that type of change, there is nevertheless the emergence of a particular kind of urban condition, remarkable in its characteristic of extensive, slow, urban-rural hybridization. I ask, how might such lived ecologies be drawn into a cartographic practice for urban design in a meaningful way? And so to begin, I must first share my approach to the term peri-urban. There have been three distinct, just change that. There have been three distinct ways of defining peri-urban in time, from edges to extension, including extended regions, and beyond the city, meaning accounts that reject the term peri-urban altogether by pointing out that urbanization does not necessarily occur in proximity to cities. In all cases, the rural is portrayed as a mere backdrop for the more spectacular processes of urbanization. So in response, my approach is to first retain peri-urban as a useful concept. I argue that its validity must be judged in terms of the context of its use and the function it is expected to perform. And then relatedly, I account for the fact that processes of urban-rural hybridization exhibit distinct dynamics in different settings by engaging a situated urban political ecology approach. And third, my response is to bring a focus on the legacies of the settled rural, which includes both the post-rural and rural intensification. I do this by including a focus on hybrid urban-rural mixing and non-human agency. And I use the term non-human agency in a broad way, encompassing institutions with their official documents and reports, infrastructural and architectural legacies, as well as the more traditional forceful agencies of heat, humidity, wind, water, vegetative decay and growth, and the life of animals. So in my study, I chose to look at hybrid urban-rural mixing at the edge of metropolitan Kolkata. I argue that my study area is ordinary. It is a sample from a larger condition of landscape change. So this map here is the Kolkata metropolitan area with the Hooghly River shown in black. And my not spectacular 1 kilometer square study area is here, if you can see it. It is located within Maheshtam municipality, which is one of many new municipalities that have been formed since the 1990s. So those new municipalities can be seen in brown in relation to the older municipalities seen in light pink. And the rural areas within the metropolitan area are shown in light brown. So learning from geographer Jennifer Robinson, I also explore the term ordinary within ordinary cities approaches, and I position my research as a contribution to comparativism. So in my study, I analyze how ordinary peri-urban Calcutta has been rendered in secondary data, and I re-render it. So in my rendering, I start with two plans, the 2011 perspective plan, which are the two maps on the left, and the 2025 vision plan, which are the maps are on the right. And in these maps, my study area, it might be a little hard to see, but it's shown with a yellow symbol. So the 2011 plan was created in 1990 to contain the problematic megacity through a strategy of decentralization. For the urban was considered full and the rural was seen as available to receive the overspill future urban. In the 2011 plan, the dots represent existing settlements sorted into a hierarchy of classes, and urban and rural are separated into different maps. In the 2025 vision, the two on the right, created in 2005, there was a shift in the construction of territory. Rather than seeing the megacity as a negative problem to be managed and decentered, it was viewed positively as an engine for growth. So in this plan, the dots show proposed new centers in the region, also sorted into a hierarchy of classes. But confusingly, also the dots appear to be the main subject of the map. The investment that the plan facilitates is for road construction, as can be seen in the PowerPoint slides here, shown here from a mobility plan created at the same time. So given the graphic incomprehensibility, like weak design and drafting, and informational ambition, maps with too much information, the reader is given the impression that none of the spatial elements are serious propositions, or alternatively, every spatial element is serious, but it's negotiable. The obscuring effect is intensified rather than alleviated by their unavailability. These maps were very hard for me to find. So this practice of map making articulates how the urban agencies of the government of West Bengal, like other state entities in India, are clear on their aspiration for urban India, which is a brand, but unclear about their role in carving out the route to that future. The state agencies that map these urban futures are increasingly in the hands of public-private partnerships and the political elite, as shown here in the 2030 state plan created in 2019. So the 2030 plan is a geographical information system platform that measures key performance indicators where standards and pathways of development are realized in and through colorful classification, ranking, and competition. And I'm still learning what these indicators are doing on the ground in place, for they are a new idiom and are highly flexible. So overall, in these three visualizations, the ordinary peri-urban is missing. It is simply white space, blank space. And to address it, I re-rendered it from the household. So this diagram, which is just a sketch that I had on my desk as I was doing my research, shows my re-rendering cartographic practice to date. Learning from geographer Gillian Rose, I show my research journey from walking to visualizing to circulations, and including my sharing of the work right now that I put here in the diagram for you. So I re-rendered from the household. I met with people, mostly women, as they were at home during the week. The white rectangle here is my 1 kilometer square study area, and the pink shows the roads and the buildings, and the yellow symbols show the location of my interviews with 37 residents. I used my body as a sensing device, and I conducted 3 half-kilometer detailed transects, A, B, and C. So A is the wooded settled, Boraitam, the wooded settled area. B is the colony. In India, they call them colony, but they're housing settlements and former paddy fields. And C, the local main road. I used remote sensing to understand land cover change over time. So here's an image from 2002 and showing the changes in 2008. I looked closely at colonial maps, including failed master plans for the area. An important drawing was a timeline that I made of the study area through the lenses of the household conversations. So each bar here is a household story, and long-time residents have lived in the area since the 1850s. You can see on the left. Mud houses are shown in brown and actively cultivated fields in green. Newcomers began settling into the colonies in former paddy fields since the 1990s. And concrete houses are shown in red, and fallow fields are shown in light green. So my cartographic re-rendering animates these incremental and spatially diffuse characteristics. My written urban political ecology analysis, however, was difficult to narrate. And so this is one of my process drawings that's not in my book. So geographer Sarah Pink also expressed this thought about narration, noting that some problems we face when we write linear texts with words as our only tool can only be resolved by thinking of ethnographic knowledge and its representations as multilinear. And so I'm going to return to this point on multilinearity later. So in my book, I balance text, map, and photography equally, for they form a relational set for understanding. And in the book, I share detailed accounts of drainage and water logging, land conversion forces, the end of cultivation and the emergence of jungle, the settlement of colonies on the jungly former paddy land, the cultivation and dilapidation of wooded settled areas, including ponds, plantations, and gardens, or what they call in West Bengal bagans, and the roles of middlemen, the ward council clubs, and committees. So I do not have time to deliver on all the reflections from the book, so I'm just going to focus on one I thought you might be interested in, which is about density, and it contributes to other work being done on rethinking how density is measured and evaluated as well as lived. So overall, my re-rendering of a 1 kilometer square peri-urban area seeks to temper the primacy of the megacity as the formative urban element in Gangetic West Bengal. After all, territory is a technique for measuring land and controlling terrain, as well as a process that is continually made and remade. So through sustained attention on the settled rural landscape, I find that vegetation, water, and darkness are forceful and do work to shape space and subjectivity. That is, the post-rural landscape is powerful. As argued by architect Stephen Cairns, urban effects and opportunities are uniquely absorbed by the pre-existing rural settlement conditions. And then again, as noted by geographer Matthew Gandy, urban nature, what he calls urban nature, like the post-rural landscape, is important for its functions as ruins and refugia. Urban nature is vital to meaning and ecological value as settlements densify. So just quickly, here's an image of a man next to, in his plantation, which is family-owned plantation, and he's got a set of ponds. This is called a hobby garden, and their plantation you can see there at the back. This is the plantation on the pond bund. In this case, it's a mahogany, and you can see the overgrown jungly paddy fields on the right. And in this case here is a flooded pond, which has become waterlogged and the trees are drowning. And here's another example. This is the last farm in my study area. And when people stop farming, it starts to grow, of course, and become jungly. And then here's a colony road being built into the former paddy area. And this is what a colony looks like. But it has roads here that can fit a car, but there's also side roads that are much smaller. And of course, the plants do not stop growing, and they create their own force and energy that shapes how people live. So rather than being thought of as not dense yet or not dense enough to warrant attention, the study area is thought of as actively dense along other registers. So I offer the mapping practice created in my book as an entangled increment, as a lively thing. Maps are things, and they have lives and temporalities of their own, while the practice of representing metropolitan Kolkata through an interface managed by the central government can be thought of as ascendant cartography. There are unofficial cartographic objects in Kolkata and elsewhere, and they exist in a complex relationship with expert state documents. They are not counter to or resisting the state. Rather, they augment the state's maps with spaces and expressions of everyday life. And my practice of mapping is positioned in relation to those experimental geographies. And as promised, Graham, I'm going to finish up my presentation with my most recent cartographic lively thing. I'll briefly share this event entitled This Will Be Something, Peri-Urban Cartographies of the Post-Rural, which was enacted here at the Department of Architecture at NUS just a month ago. And this project was sponsored by a Ministry of Education grant here in Singapore. So in 2024, I decided to advance my peri-urban project for numerous reasons. First, I wanted my linked maps and narratives to express the sensory experiences and the multifaceted quality of the post-rural that are just really hard to put into words and hard to picture in static two-dimensional visualizations. Second, I wanted to invent a participatory method that fit the context. And third, I wanted to empower my landscape architecture and architecture students and planning to also engage in creative design research on the topic of the peri-urban and to become accomplished peri-urban practitioners. And to achieve this goal, I decided to translate and advance my research through another media, that of film. And to do this, I collaborated with a filmmaker named Carlos Gomez. So to connect with participants, we went back to Kolkata together and we enacted local screenings in December last year. Then we followed up with, these are like recruitment screenings. Then we followed up with in-depth interviews in February this year. We visited the locality again during monsoon in June. And all of this was facilitated by my Bengali research assistants. So there's another image from our screening. we showed Bengali short films curated by a curator from Kolkata. So this Will Be Something was a 3-day media event led by a student workshop. The students explored how they may see an area on our campus that we call the Bodhi Garden. You can see the Bodhi Garden on the right. Through a peri-urban lens, this was manifested in some garden elements they created using found materials, which were later exhibited. We also enacted the film on 3 occasions, and this is not an ordinary film. This Will Be Something is a multi-channel audiovisual work conceived to unfold as both an installation and a performance. So rather than documenting a fixed reality, the installation performs a dynamic site-responsive cartography. The piece reflects how urban futures are being shaped by hybrid constellations of human and non-human forces, continually producing both intentional and accidental landscapes. It is a dynamic that can evoke the uncertainty of the cultivated enclosed garden, a metaphor mirrored in the form and the logic of the piece itself. So the installation is structured around 3 distinct yet interconnected video channels, complemented by spatialized multi-channel sound. The audiovisual system is governed by a hybrid logic of manual control and generative logic, with semantic associations and audio signal input guiding the selection and modulation of content. So the system grows and shifts in response to both its internal logic and external output. So as a result, no 2 iterations of the work are identical, and that's why we did it 3 times. So here's Carlos performing the film live, sort of like a musical instrument. It's also called live cinema. And here's another shot from the outdoor event. And this is from the student exhibition. And then, if funded, I plan to enact the film outside of Singapore, as many places as we can, including returning to the locality in an iterative manner and participatory manner. Also, if funded, I propose creating a live cinema student film festival here at the Department of Architecture. And I just want to quickly conclude by acknowledging my awesome NUS students from the Kolkata studio that I did earlier this year, funded by Singapore Ministry of Education, and also for students for all of my Monsoon Asia peri-urban studios that I've taught here since 2022. And I also need to note that my peri-urban practice has a New York genealogy. I began making with, in my first 2 exhibitions in Kolkata, India in 2014, and Hangzhou in China in 2017. And both of these were sponsored by the India-China Institute at the New School in New York. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot,
Connects
Victoria.
back to Olga in interesting ways. Okay, wow.
Really amazing these 4 presentations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ming, wow.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for all for your wonderful presentations. And it's a really a gift for me with so abundant and diverse and very intellectual exchanges from the book. I think start from the book of Collage City. I'm actually a professor at the Southeast University and teaching architecture and urban design for quite a long time. And I'm also a practicing architect and urban designer based in Shanghai and Nanjing, and many doing regenerating urban projects and architecture designs. And I was the translator of urban Collage City into a Chinese version, but it's quite many years ago. So I quite afraid that I cannot catch up with the content of the seminar of this evening or this morning. But I must thank you very much. You've drawn me back a lot with those wonderful speeches. For quite recently, I spent a lot of time not in College City, but in the Transparency, another paper of Colin Rowe and Robert Slutsky, in order to improve my understanding of the backgrounds and also the more deeper thinkings of this kind of design, intelligence within the design. I think it's very tightly related with each other because the basic idea of a figure crown, the technique of that. But I must thank Charles very much for your presentation and demonstrating so many wonderful drawings in the urban design studios, especially by the way of the tracing paper. So that is quite meaningful. That allows us to input so many things and materials and informations together and generated things in different ways. For my understanding that the figure ground is not only a kind of design technique, but also a way of thinking. And it's generated from a long way of development from the Gestalt psychology since the 20th centuries, and transformed into a method of architectural design, and also more developed by Colin Rowe into urban design. And I think it's very valuable for us to tackle with so many things together. So from the four speeches of this time, I cannot catch up with all the things and all the ways of your works and also your thinking. But I think it's very important that all the speeches can draw us back to not only to the context of the College City, and also but also the time when the cities start to transform from the traditional fabric into modern or postmodern or even unclear status into the future. So it's very clearly presented by Marcia in her studies in Indian cities. That's very fabulous. I think I can grab some ideas from the four speeches. Typically, very especially in a very unique feature that led us into some questions. The questions maybe relate with how could the technique of collage or figure ground of design could be applicable in terms of different scale, right? The different scales in terms of architecture, urban and regional. And the second, I think, is the question of how could it be translated into different fields, not only about architecture, but also into the landscape and the urban context, and also maybe geographical or urban design urban planning, urban urban administrative management, something like that, right? So this could be translated into different fields. And thirdly, I think the topic, all the topics relate with the different dimensions. The way of collage or figure ground of design not only could be applicable into the physical environment in terms of buildings and squares and terrace and fields, but also could be applicable into some social dimensions and the cultural dimensions. I think that is very important. And firstly, I think the meaning of the collage could be applicable into different backgrounds, not only within the context of the Roma city of the Renaissance or in the Imperial time, but also could be applicable into the cities like Ankara in Turkey, or the Asian city like Seoul and Shanghai, but also the cities in India. So within those kind of different cultural and social background and timing background, could be such kind of design technology and way of thinking be useful, still be useful, right, for today and into the future. I think that is quite open a kind of space for further thinking. Yes, and along with those wonderful thinkings, I think you presented very wonderful case studies and your research works, and also your practical work in Ankara and in Seoul and in India, the city. Let's see, Calcutta, right? Yeah, Calcutta. Yes, yeah, Calcutta. Yeah. So that's in some kind of aspect turned out the way of collage or the way of figure ground thinking, that is quite universal. So that is quite very universal to all the way around the world and all the time throughout the history. And it's basically a kind of visual intelligence or intelligence inside within the visual language. So that is, I think, is very meaningful. Means the visual intelligence is quite transcultural and trans-history. It's the essence of the creative intelligence of human beings. And I think if we could explore more from it, that could allow us to tackle with the unexpectable movement of the future. So that's I can grasp from the meaning from the presentation of years year here on the exhibition of Rowe and Ongus, because I know that Rowe and the relation between Rowe and Ongus is a little bit in tension in 1970s. But due to the different perspective on the urban trends at that time, So, but on the another aspect is very helpful as well, because such kind of tensions in between or among the different viewpoints could very um, useful for push us to develop more creative thinkings by the way of design. So that's of some my reflections on or observations from the four speakers. It's definitely not enough. I must have missed a lot of important things. So that that's all I want to present at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ming. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wonder if there's any response from the speakers. Like, it's interesting. Ming is talking about the range of different um, uh, talking about the visualization and then the whole range of different cultures and the creative tension between them. And so we have like Charles, who has presented the incredible historic piece of a research studio where Roe was working and placed it in a context. And then we have Olga with the machinic reading of the Roe Ungus studios and how they constructed and read context in different ways, which in a funny way really links up to Imere's presentation. And she didn't mention that the Seattle project was where she worked was by Manfredi Weiss, and Michael Manfredi was a student when Charles was in school, but they were contemporaries. So the studio unfolded into the landscape of the Seattle project, very, very beautiful project, and which was very, very complicated, three-dimensional down a cliff, piece of fragmentation also. And then there's this whole questioning of the mapping of the figure ground into the future and the tension of the media role in the presentations and mapping and satellite imagery and so on, that Charles is involved in a very interesting way with his blog, and which we at GUD are on that perimeter too. So I just wonder if anybody wants to talk to Ming's idea about the role of figure ground, transparency, landscape, and the visual intellect that we all share, the visual intelligence in a sort of global situation. I don't know. That's me making a little summary, asking questions.
Can I chip in here? Or,
Please.
the figure ground, I think, is very important historically and in use today. I'm more intrigued with Victoria's approach, which is obviously, and Olga mentioned parametric use, but it's obvious that GIS is being used. I'm curious to hear more. Is anybody referring to space syntax as a mapping device? Is anybody talking about Zaha Hadid's office with Schumacher using parametric design as a mapping process, which I think is, I'm not quite sure, but Victoria, are you only using GIS in this case, or what's your platform?
No, I'm tracing. It's very
It's
old
all by
school.
hand. Okay,
I'm just
which
using
is fine, but
I use some GIS data from the municipality, but I use it very simply as layers in Adobe. So there's no yeah, it's I actually didn't use GIS through as a drawing
Olgu,
tool. I just use
Are you
data.
using parameter? Sorry,
So
Olgu, are you using parametrics?
Yeah, this is what I told actually.
Yes.
But it's a
Yeah.
little bit unfortunate to equate a parametric design with Zahad's early experimentations because Zaha and Patrick Schumacher used parametric modeling as a kind of a design machine rather than a kind of a control tool for the diverse building activities, which generates the complexity of the city, but rather they compose the whole set of urban setting with one single algorithmic design setting. So in this sense, I would rather address the use of parametric modeling as a kind of a simulation, not as a kind of a final design, simulating different applications of different typologies to be emerged within the same context, rather than creating a kind of a compositional unity, which is completely, I think, against the idea of original perspective of Colin Rowe. I also criticize the very early use of parametric modeling in urban design as well.
In space syntax, how did you see that?
Well, there are some plugins of space syntax to be used in parametric modeling as well. So, space syntax considers the representation of the urban fabric and pattern with its configurational features like integration, betweenness, closeness. So they're all about the network structure. And the parametric modeling deals with the compositional quality of the fabric. So in that sense, the creative tension between the configuration and the composition is also possible to play with, to simulate within parametric modeling. Actually, this is currently what we are trying to do to integrate space syntax with urban design via parametric modeling tools. Yeah.
The space syntax is only just beginning to become three-dimensional. It's got a real problem. It's really interesting with Victoria. She's mapping the original agricultural matrix, transforming slowly, and with the settlements and so on, and the landscape going back into water, and blah blah blah, and how space syntax would do that. They're only just getting staircases, and I don't know. Are you critical of space syntax too?
Asking
Olga?
Olgu?
Yeah, or you?
Well, but I couldn't understand why you are critical on space syntax, because it's a kind of a representational tool. It's a kind of a tool for urban morphology to understand the underlying the network structural characteristics of an urban pattern. So it doesn't necessarily provide a kind of a basis for design, by the way.
May I jump into
Re-
the discussion?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I have to spend a lot of time in order to thank you. You have given, I mean, I learned a lot, and I think it was amazing to have finally, at least for me, an understanding both of parametrics, but mostly of how Colin Rowe managed to do the analysis that Olgu presented, but then it was enriched by the other two presentations that gave me the possibility to understand what is my question. That is space syntax apart or in, my understanding, always my understanding of Collage City or of Colin Rowe was the idea that we're talking about urban stratification. If we're talking about figure plan or about space syntax, the stratification is lost, as far as I understand. And the history of the urban history is as well put in on a second level. Am I correct on this understanding, or where I'm wrong? I mean, this is one of the issues I want to address. Then I will ask more if we'll have time.
Well, should I respond?
All of you.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not an expert in space syntax, but we use in both in morphological analysis and design quite oftenly. So space syntax is a kind of a representation of the underlying structure of what we observe from the window of the plane. So in that sense, it's a kind of a reduction of form to the network structure, the lines, the segments, and the nodes. So in that sense, stratification, I think, is quite possible to be represented via such a morphological analysis tool like space syntax, but it depends on your methodology to define the use of the tool within this analytical process, I think. Because as much as I know, it's quite used in archaeological research too, in urban archaeological research too. So especially in urban archaeological sites, it's quite possible to reveal the multi-layered structure of the remainings and the existing city, and how they coalesce within the same context can be analyzed by using space syntax. But the
Probably
point is
I
that
was sorry if I interrupt you, Olgu. The reason I was asking wasn't the space syntax what it does or does not. It was that Colin Rowe, in my understanding, was always understanding the space, the figure plan from which it started, or Roma Interrota, as an example that you brought forward, and not only you, also your colleagues, as an urban stratification. Not and as context, by urban stratification is meant how space changes, not only buildings, and therefore not only archaeology. So in this sense, I was asking if in your understanding, because I mean, all three of you, or more or less all three, probably you underlined it less, but for sure, Charles and I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly your name, but it's Yehre, said clearly, or at least this is what I understood, that the labs and the courses, etc., were based on history. Okay, so I was wondering to which extent in your kind of teaching urban design, you still, independently of the tools you use, you still underline the aspect of urban history, or therefore of urban stratification. Sorry if I interrupted you, but I think this makes things a bit clearer. I don't care about space syntax. I was just trying to understand. Okay.
Well, personally, I'm retired, but in the third year studio that I did, history was a large part. Urban history is an example. I mentioned John Rep's class that we were encouraged to take. Colin never really specifically always talked about urban history, but he was constantly referring to a number of books that we should always study in a case like that.
Yes, in fact, I mean, all of you, but that's why I'm saying also Olgu, independently if you said it or not, it seemed to me that it was in your, I mean, I don't want to say subconsciously, but if somebody is talking about Roma Interrota, you can't talk about this case without thinking of the history which was explained in the text of Colin Rowe independently of the design, or actually in order to base the design. So, I mean, all these kind of quotations, citations of places, of figure plans, in other words, of figure grounds, they were bringing with them their own history, which at the end was contraposed and collaged or assembled, but they had a meaning. And in this sense, I think it was somehow coming back to the same discussion, the Ming's suggestion, to which extent the approach of Colin Rowe and the internationality they have, this what he called intelligence of the figure grounds, the fact that everybody throughout the world can understand the same kind of language, if this can be useful today. So, I mean, I'm changing my question now that in order to make you realize that I'm not asking in order to find out what Colin Rowe was saying, which is, of course, very important, but also to which extent can be useful still today. Useful, I mean, as an approach. For on a global society we're living, because we're not talking anymore about Europe where everybody understands what it means. I don't know, I mean, the references you were making to the popcorns or to the piazzas, I mean, the fact that we talk about Camillo Zita as if it's something obvious, it's not obvious for the Indian culture, the Asiatic culture, the African cultures, etc., etc. So that's why I'm asking you,
I think that raises a really interesting aspect of the figure ground methodology, especially like considering the city that I know, Seoul, very well. It's an old city, but there is so much new developments of the city with people not having a memory of spatial morphologies that are more traditionally based, like Europe, um, and that kind of historical allegories and memories, and those kind of foundations do not exist within the culture, or it's very fragmented. And in that case, I think the urban design planning that happens in the contemporary city of Seoul, or cities like, I guess, Seoul, where modernization happens so fast, the figure ground takes on a very different, I think, understanding. Like, it becomes more archaeological. Like, is it an effort to trace traditional historical centuries old remnants as archaeology, or is it a superimposition of new new morphologies, urban morphologies, to create a brand new insertion? So I think rather than the figure ground, the idea of collage, I think, is more, or brick collage is definitely more adaptable to, I think, cities like Seoul. So even in the collage city, the idea of, I think, diversity is the most important component from what I can understand. And I think different cities take on the thesis of the collage city in different ways. So the figure ground, I think, it's for me at least, it's always been limiting to think of it as a methodology um, to think about cities like Seoul. And I think there are other more opportunistic strategies that Colin Rowe presents that seems more adequate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't know anymore. I was thinking.
May I
Yes,
jump
please.
in? Yeah, I think the significance of the contextualism is quite based on history. But the most challenge of today um, is the meaning of the history. Because you know that the generation for us is quite uh, uh, looking upon the history because the meaning of our existence come from the history. But for the next generations or the next generations who grow up inside or around the cyberspaces, they were naturally separated from the real space and real time. So how could they follow up such kind of understanding? Uh, the continuous of the time and the meaning from the history and also the meaning of the environment. I think that is very challenging uh, in inside the urban design and architectural design because I'm now facing a lot of problems with my students because when we talk about the context of the site and which were the base or starting of the process, uh, you know that it is quite quite annoying, quite discouraging and annoying. Some I got very frustrated with that very much. You know that I think the problem I met with is the disconnection. Is this disconnection with the future or with the next generations who also lost the this kind of natural understanding of the human environment or human society of the all around throughout the history. Yeah, that's my observation.
I'd like to ask Victoria if she's there.
I'm here.
When you make the enactment with the students, do you think you're breaking through that cyber disconnection that Ming's talking about? With your, I mean, because it's a very mediated
Yeah,
event.
yeah. I would just go back to the, how would I say, like the earlier discussion on the figure ground and their history. I tend to use Google Earth history tool. In my teaching, I like this a lot. It's not figure ground, but you're able to trace, um, seasons, monsoon, patterns of development, and also link it to environmental history. And so I think that's something that I just wanted to add into the mix there. So there's a lot of history of plants here, plantations. There's history of infestations and eradications. And honestly, my students are fascinated by all of this. So I sort of having a different experience than you, Ming, on that. So the students got really interested in history here, and try to making it public in the way they think about design. Because right now I'm teaching landscape architecture. So now I'm talking about Singapore, right? I sort of shifted from a weak state place to a strong state. so yeah, here I think that I have more affinity with Seoul and, the figure ground in Singapore where the replacement is massive and ongoing. So nothing lasts for more than 50 years here. And it's always in a cycle of on its way out or on its way in. So that is also a reality at the same time. So again, it's the multifaceted. There's a sort of a fast change, but also maybe my summary is like a look back to history, but not the regular history of squares and churches, cathedrals, but the colonial, post-colonial stories of extraction and I don't know, settlement and being global all together.
But do you think that the media component and the presentations you do somehow make it more related to the life and living reality, like of the semi-formal urbanization process that you're kind of mapping? And does that somehow become more alive through the students are so heavily familiar with the media in ways that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't really, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a pedagogical question.
For me, I've got working in Singapore, I have generational difference, but there's also massive cultural difference. But as you know, we're all living in digital, so there's things we share and things that are different. Most of my disconnect is cultural, but that's a separate thing than what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is with the film, we're calling it malleable. And so that's turning into a really helpful word. And so it's something that it has form, but we can shape it in doing it. And also as we work with people, it can also adjust iteratively with working with people. So it's sort of that's the thing we're working with that we found through doing it. So that's all we created. We learned. That was our takeaway from this last week. And so I just want to try to teach, to break it down into basic elements and teach the student and give them some workshops and start teaching the students to work with it as a tool and see what they make. So it's a little different than putting drawings on the wall. It's actually sort of inhabiting something you create. But that's not new. So.
Graham, may I come in again?
Please.
No, because I know that the time is over, that's why.
No, I can see it's dark.
Okay, no, I just want to make three kind of suggestions, let's put it this way. I mean, as always, seminars are an occasion to learn, but also an occasion to put forward new ideas, quote unquote new, I don't know. So out of this kind of seminar of today, which I'm really grateful once again, not only to the panelists, but mainly to you, because I mean, you still go on with this project of contextualism, but mostly with so amazing case studies bringing in every time. So apart from thanking you, I really think that they came up two ideas that one is from the panelists and the other from the discussant. I think what Ming put forward are a cyber disconnection, or the way you presented it, a cyber disconnection is a huge issue. We all know that is a huge issue. It depends from which point of view each of us look at it. But anyway, urban design, it will be one of the fields it will touch. So I'm suggesting to the people that they are here and to the good GUD coordinator or you yourself, if we want to take forward this kind of challenge and create a seminar on it. This is one. The second is much more down to earth, but still is a real kind of subject put forward by at least the three first presentations, although also Vittoria's was implicitly in the subject. That is pedagogy, the pedagogical tools, not only as tools, but also as methodologies that urban design has used and is using. And my suggestion is to create some seminars, a circle of this, on the issue of how schools that today, or courses that today exist of urban design, and we have here at least 3 to 4 people from also the GUD members I know, that they teach urban design. If we want to start doing a comparison, by comparison, I mean on specific issues like methodology and pedagogical genealogies, if you want, which was one of the aspects that came forward in the presentations, in order to start just exchanging, probably even learning. I mean, so that the schools afterwards can go on by exchanging and making, I don't know, adjustments probably, or whatever else. And the last thing, these are the suggestions. The last thing is mostly for Charles Graves, but of course is for all of us as a point of thinking. You know that in Rome has opened a museum, it's called the Museum of the Forma Urbis, that is the Rome Marmorea, that is the marble plan, the early, 2nd century before Christ, plan of Rome that was in the Forum, now has been taken in a museum and has been exhibited on top of the Noli plan. And of course, some of the didascalie, what they're called, the explanations and of the guide tour and the guidebook you have, are to which extent this kind of first plan has influenced not only Piranesi, but also Colin Rowe. So I think this is another genealogy that is interesting to look at, and of course take advantage in understanding more if you want, or even discuss the interpretation of this museum and the way it has been organized. So that's all. No, I didn't want to say more than these 3 things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. A lot of things on the floor, and also for David, new commitment.
From all of us.
Yes. For me as a coordinator, I am very happy if you want to organize this. So.
Great.
Yes, we have to continue. The struggle continues.
So, Victoria, Charles, etc.
Well, we probably have finished our time. I don't know. Maricela, what do you think?
But you say about possible a new seminars?
Oh, there's a hand there. Yes, no, the new seminars always more. But I saw a hand go up. I don't know where. Somehow.
It was clapping.
Did you see that? Oh, it's clapping. Oh, okay.
No,
The
yes,
cyber,
it's just
the
to say
cyber
thank
connect.
you. Yeah, it's just to say thank you to all of you. Thank you very much for this excellent seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasiliki.
We have the recording, and Maricela will share it.
Yes. So, okay, now I would like to thanks again everybody. And I don't know if there are any other questions, maybe, okay, maybe not. So I would like to thanks very, very much all our panelists. So Professor Gu Kalistan, Architect Yeresu, Professor Charles Grace, and Professor Victoria Marshall. and also Professor Tom Ming as a discussant. And least but as you know, last but not least, our member of the scientific committee, Graham Shane, professor at Columbia, who always give us a new possible idea for contextually and beyond themes. I would also like to thank Eleni because she asked new possibility of seminars. So David, you know, your next commitment, but also Victoria, if you're interested in organizing this kind of topic in scholar in a university, so what Eleni proposed, and so Charles Greaves. I'd like to remember that we have a website, gooddesign.org, and you can find many kind of information about our network. So if you have time, look at this website. We have a new newsletter, the Good Design. Now we have Good Design 3, so we organized the third newsletter together with Vasiliki Petridou. So if you have information, something that you want to organize with us, also what is important, you organize. So information about urban design activity, please send us to Vasiliki and me an email, and we will include it in the next newsletter. We also, as I told at the beginning, we have also organized a new blog, and this could be an occasion, very fast, quick, to have information, what you want about urban design. So I will give you more information in the next days. So, David, I don't know if you want to add something about it. Okay, about contextually seminar, or we can conclude.
No, I think it's been really, really nice, surprising in many ways, discussion and beautiful presentations. I thank everyone, and Ming too, for the stimulating questions at the end. And no, you never know what's going to happen. And this has been really wonderful. I think my assistant RA, Ashwita, for everything. And I look forward to next time. And Helene always gives us more work. It'll be great. Thanks, Helene.
Thank you, Sveta, for your all your information and fly. And also I would like, because now she is here, Emanuela Margione, who always help us for the network and for the flyer. So thank you also to Emanuela Margione. So we are finishing, and it's quite 5, so it's about 5, so we have to conclude. And again, thanks, and see you to the next activity of Good Design Network. So bye bye, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
for having us. Bye bye.